The cabin buzzed with a hum of quiet conversations as passengers settled into their seats. Flight 453 from New York to Chicago was just another routine trip, or so everyone thought. Among the passengers was Adrian Cole, a sharply dressed man in his early 40s. His unassuming demeanor and calm expression made him blend in, but the aura of quiet confidence he carried set him apart for those who paid closer attention. Seated in economy class, Adrian adjusted his leather laptop bag beneath the seat in front of him, then leaned back, his gaze wandering out the window. The afternoon light poured in, casting a warm glow over his tailored charcoal suit. For Adrian, this wasn't a special flight. It was just another check on his growing company, Horizon Air, one of the top luxury aviation services in the country. But he didn't flaunt his ownership. Instead, he preferred to travel like any other passenger, anonymously. It kept him grounded, reminding him of why he had built the company in the first place. Nearby, Olivia Barnes, a seasoned flight attendant in her early 30s, moved briskly through the cabin, her polished smile firmly in place. Her navy uniform was immaculate, and her years of experience were evident. But today she felt the weight of her frustration. A last-minute schedule change, and the stress of a delayed boarding had left her on edge. As she scanned the cabin with sharp eyes, ensuring everything was in order, something about Adrian caught her attention and her irritation. Maybe it was the way he had already asked for a second glass of water before takeoff, or perhaps it was something about his quiet confidence. Whatever it was, Olivia felt herself bristling, building an invisible wall between herself and the man who would unknowingly become the center of her frustration. The plane's engines roared to life as Flight 453 began its ascent. Passengers leaned back in their seats, scrolling through their phones or flipping through magazines, settling into the rhythm of the journey. Adrian adjusted his seatbelt and opened his leather notebook, jotting down ideas for an upcoming business meeting. His calm demeanor seemed at odds with the subtle tension building nearby. Olivia, still on edge from the chaotic start to her day, moved briskly through the aisle, her sharp eyes scanning for anything out of place. She paused at Adrian's row, her polished smile faltering slightly as she noticed his relaxed posture. Something about his quiet confidence continued to gnaw at her, though she couldn't pinpoint why. As she approached, her tone lacked the warmth she usually carried. "Sir, please ensure your tray table is secured," she said curtly. Adrian glanced up briefly, his calm expression unchanging. "It already is," he replied politely. Olivia hesitated momentarily, her frustration flickering across her face. But she dismissed the interaction and brushed it off as a minor annoyance. Yet deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about him challenged her, though she didn't understand why. The cabin settled into a quiet calm as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Olivia continued her duties, but her gaze occasionally drifted back to Adrian. Meanwhile, Adrian remained focused on his notebook, unaware that he had become the center of her growing irritation. What seemed like a small misunderstanding was about to escalate into something far more explosive, leaving everyone on board stunned. The cabin settled into its usual calm as Flight 453 cruised at altitude. Adrian, seated comfortably in economy class, flipped through the pages of his leather notebook, jotting notes with a practiced ease. His focus remained sharp, seemingly unaffected by the slight tension in the air. Meanwhile, Olivia's frustration simmered beneath her polished exterior. As she moved down the aisle with the beverage cart, she couldn't help but glance at Adrian again. His composed demeanor, paired with his quiet confidence, felt almost defiant to her. She didn't understand why, but it grated on her nerves. As Olivia approached his row, Adrian pressed the call button. Her smile was still in place, but strained as she stopped beside him. "Yes, sir?" she asked, her tone clipped. Adrian held up his empty water cup. "May I have a refill, please?" His tone was calm, polite, and free of any urgency. Olivia's jaw tightened slightly, though she kept her voice steady. "We're in the middle of service, sir. I'll get to it when I can." Adrian nodded, his expression unchanging. "That's fine. I'll wait." He returned his attention to his notebook, unaware that his composed response had only fueled her irritation further. As Olivia pushed the cart down the aisle, her thoughts raced. Why does he act like that? Like the world revolves around him? It wasn't the first time she had felt this way about a passenger, but something about Adrian felt personal. Minutes later, as Olivia returned with the cart, she noticed Adrian pressing the call button again. She froze briefly, irritation flashing across her face before approaching. "Sir, I've already told you I'll serve you when I can," she said, her voice betraying her frustration. Adrian looked up, his expression calm but questioning. "I pressed the button because I thought you might have forgotten," he said simply. The calmness of his words hung in the air, cutting through the cabin's subdued noise. A few passengers in nearby rows turned to glance at the interaction, sensing the tension. Olivia felt her cheeks flush as frustration bubbled to the surface. "Sir, there's no need to press the button repeatedly," she snapped, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of more passengers. "We have a system, and I'll get to you when it's your turn." Adrian leaned back slightly, his tone remaining composed. "If you're upset, perhaps we can discuss this calmly, without an audience." To Olivia, his tone wasn't calm. It felt patronizing. She stepped closer, her voice lowering but sharpening. "Excuse me?" The tension in the cabin was now palpable. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances as Olivia's colleague, a senior flight attendant named Greg, gave her a concerned look, silently signaling her to step back. But Olivia couldn't stop herself, the frustration she had been holding in finally spilling over. The tension in the cabin was palpable as passengers shifted uneasily in their seats, their eyes darting toward the interaction unfolding in first class. Adrian remained calm, his composed demeanor unshaken as Olivia stood before him, her frustration visibly bubbling over. "Sir, you don't get to lecture me about courtesy," Olivia snapped, her voice sharp and loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. The words hung in the air, drawing wide-eyed stares from those nearby. Adrian leaned back slightly, his expression calm but piercing. "Miss Barnes," he said, his voice measured but firm, "I believe this has gone far enough. Perhaps we should resolve this matter professionally." Greg, the senior flight attendant, quickly intervened, his face pale with concern. "Olivia, step back," he whispered urgently, his tone pleading. But Olivia stayed rooted, her pride and anger preventing her from retreating. Greg turned to Adrian, his voice strained. "Sir, I deeply apologize for this incident. Please allow us to address it immediately." Adrian nodded slightly, his tone calm yet authoritative. "I think it's time to involve the captain," he said simply. Greg froze for a moment before quickly stepping away to alert the captain. Olivia's face turned pale as her mind raced, the weight of Adrian's words beginning to sink in. The murmurs of passengers around her grew louder. A man seated 2 rows back leaned toward his wife. "Wait a second," he whispered. "Isn't that Adrian Cole, the CEO of Horizon Air?" The realization rippled through the cabin, and the whispers turned into a quiet buzz. Olivia, still standing frozen in the aisle, felt her knees weaken. "The CO?" she muttered to herself, her voice barely audible. Greg returned with the captain, a composed man in his late 40s, his uniform crisp as he approached Adrian. "Sir, I've been informed of the incident," the captain said cautiously. "How would you like us to proceed?" Adrian stood, adjusting his suit with quiet confidence. "Let's address this in private," he said firmly. "I'd like to have a word with your crew." The captain gestured toward the front of the plane, and Adrian followed him to the small crew lounge near the cockpit. Passengers watched in stunned silence as Adrian walked past, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos left behind. Some whispered, and others pulled out their phones to snap pictures or search his name. Olivia stood motionless, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. The quiet hum of judgment from the passengers was almost unbearable as she realized she had crossed a line she could never uncross. The cabin was alive with hushed whispers as passengers processed what had just unfolded. Phones lit up with searches for Adrian Cole, confirming what many now realized. The calm man seated in first class was in fact the CEO of Horizon Air. Olivia stood near the galley, her hands trembling and her face pale. The weight of her actions hit her like a tidal wave. The murmurs of passengers seemed louder now, each one a quiet judgment. "I can't believe she did that," someone whispered. "She slapped the CEO of the airline," another said in disbelief. In the small crew lounge near the cockpit, Adrian sat calmly, his phone resting on the table in front of him. The captain and Greg stood nearby, their postures stiff with unease. The captain spoke carefully. "Mr. Cole, on behalf of the entire crew, I deeply apologize for this incident. Please rest assured, we will address this immediately." Adrian nodded, his voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your professionalism," he said, "but this isn't just about me. What happened in the cabin reflects on the entire company, and I won't let this slide." Greg stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, Miss Barnes, has been under a lot of pressure lately, but that doesn't excuse her actions." Adrian's expression remained unreadable as he tapped lightly on the table. "Pressure doesn't justify disrespect or hostility," he said evenly. "This isn't just about one person. It's about ensuring every crew member represents the company's values. I'll handle this after the flight." Meanwhile, back in the cabin, Olivia stood frozen as passengers continued to murmur. Some glared at her openly. Others shook their heads in disapproval. One passenger, a middle-aged woman across the aisle, leaned forward and said quietly, "Why would you treat someone like that? He didn't deserve it." Olivia's throat tightened, but she had no response. Her pride, anger, and regret swirled in her mind, leaving her unable to speak. Moments later, Adrian returned to the cabin, his presence drawing every eye. He stood at the front, addressing the passengers with calm authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "I owe you all an explanation for what just happened." The murmur ceased immediately as the cabin fell silent. "I am Adrian Cole, the CEO of Horizon Air," he continued. "What you witnessed today does not reflect the professionalism or respect I expect from my team, or anyone representing this company." The passengers nodded in agreement, their earlier tension giving way to understanding. Adrian's gaze shifted to Olivia, who stood near the galley, visibly shaken. "Miss Barnes," he said, addressing her directly, "I don't pretend to know what you're going through, but this incident wasn't just about me. It's about how we treat one another as human beings." Olivia's eyes welled with tears as she whispered, "I'm so sorry." Adrian nodded. "I believe you, but intention isn't the same as impact. Your actions today could have escalated into something far worse. I hope you'll take this as an opportunity to reflect and grow." Turning back to the passengers, Adrian concluded, "This isn't just a lesson for the workplace. It's a reminder for all of us. Assumptions and frustrations should never dictate our actions. Whether you're in a uniform or a suit, everyone deserves respect and dignity." A round of quiet applause broke out as passengers nodded in agreement. Olivia wiped a tear from her cheek, her regret unmistakable. As the flight neared its destination, Adrian made one final announcement. "Thank you all for your patience today. Let this serve as a reminder to treat others with kindness, even in difficult moments." His words resonated deeply, leaving an impression on everyone aboard. When the plane landed, Adrian disembarked quietly, leaving behind a cabin of passengers who had witnessed something far greater than an ordinary flight. Olivia stayed back, humbled and prepared to face the consequences of her actions. Yet deep down, she realized this wasn't the end. It was a chance to begin again with a clearer perspective on respect and humility. If this story moved you, don't wait. Like and subscribe now. Every action you take helps inspire more stories like this and reminds others about the importance of kindness and respect. Let's make these lessons echo far and wide.